The sky burned red that morning when Jake Morrison first saw the ships. He stood on the roof of his apartment building in downtown Manhattan, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. When dark shadows blocked out the sun, the alien vessels hung in the air like black clouds, silent and massive, stretching from horizon to horizon. Jake dropped his coffee mug and watched it shatter on the concrete as the first beam of light came down from the nearest ship. The beam was not light at all, but something else, something that made the air itself scream. Where it touched the buildings across the street, glass melted and steel turned to dust. People ran in every direction, their voices lost in the terrible sound of the city dying. Jake ran too, down the stairs and into the street where cars had stopped moving and drivers stood looking up at the sky with their mouths open. Katie Stone was 3 blocks away when the second beam hit. She worked for the city emergency services and had been driving to work when every radio in the city started screaming warnings that made no sense. Alien invasion, they said. Take cover, they said. Evacuate the city, they said. Katie had laughed at first because it sounded like some radio show joke, but when she saw the beam cut through the Chrysler building like a hot knife through butter, she stopped laughing forever. She grabbed her radio and started calling for help, for evacuation buses, for anything that could move people away from the death that fell from the sky. Her voice joined hundreds of others on the emergency channels, all of them trying to save lives while their world ended around them. Katie drove toward the evacuation zones, picking up anyone she could find, cramming them into her van until there was no room left to breathe. Across the city, Ben Harper was trying to organize what was left of the military response. The captain had been at Fort Hamilton when the attack began, and now he stood in a command bunker 50 feet underground, watching screens that showed the destruction of everything he had sworn to protect. The Pentagon was gone, hit in the first wave. Most of the Atlantic Fleet was burning in New York Harbor. The aliens had not sent messages or made demands. They had simply started killing. Ben's radio crackled with reports from units across the country. Chicago was burning, Los Angeles was gone. The aliens were not interested in conquest in any way humans understood it. They seemed to want the cities empty and the people dead, clearing the land for something else. The few missiles that human forces had managed to launch either missed completely or exploded harmlessly against some kind of invisible shield around the alien ships. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, every major city on Earth was either destroyed or burning. The alien ships moved lower in the sky and began dropping things that looked like seeds, but grew into tall crystal towers within minutes. The towers rose from the ashes of human civilization, beautiful and terrible, reaching toward the sky like fingers made of blue light. Lisa Chen had been lucky. The Admiral was on a deep space patrol mission when the attack began, commanding a small fleet of exploration vessels. Near the edge of the solar system, she received the distress signals from Earth with disbelief, then horror, then cold rage. Her ships were too far away to help, too small to fight, and too few to make any difference, but they were also too far away to be destroyed. Lisa made the hardest decision of her life. Instead of rushing back to die with Earth, she ordered her fleet to the outer colonies. They would gather what human ships and people they could find, and they would survive. Someone had to survive to remember what had been lost and to someday make the aliens pay for what they had done. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians, though humans would not learn this for months to come. They were tall and thin with skin like polished metal and eyes that glowed within a fire. They had conquered 17 worlds before Earth, and they considered themselves the finest warriors in the galaxy. To them, humans were nothing more than another primitive species to be cleared away so that Zephyrian cities could be built on the bones of human dreams. The first Zephyrian governor landed in what had been New York and walked through the ruins. With satisfaction, the crystal towers were growing well, their roots already deep in the earth, drawing power from the planet's core. Soon there would be proper Zephyrian cities here, with proper Zephyrian citizens living lives of honor and glory. The humans who had somehow survived the cleansing would make adequate servants once they were properly trained. But the governor and his people had made one terrible mistake. They thought the war was over because the cities were burned and the governments were gone. They did not understand that they had not conquered humanity. They had only made it angry, in bunkers and caves and tunnels beneath the earth, in hidden valleys and on distant moons. Humans were gathering their strength and planning their revenge. The aliens had won the first battle, but they had no idea what kind of enemy they had chosen to fight. 6 months after the sky burned, Paul Richards crawled through the ruins of what had been the University of Chicago. The professor carried a backpack full of salvaged electronics and alien technology. pieces he had been collecting for weeks from destroyed Zephyrian vehicles. Above him, the crystal towers hummed with alien energy. But down here, in the underground tunnels that connected the old steam systems, the aliens rarely came. Paul was not alone. 37 other survivors worked with him in the makeshift laboratory. They had built in an abandoned subway station. They were engineers, scientists, students, and mechanics who had refused to give up when their world ended. They studied the alien technology day and night, trying to understand how it worked and how it could be turned against its makers. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Linda Foster, an electrical engineer who had been working on alien power cells, discovered something impossible. The Zephyrian technology was not as advanced as it appeared. It was actually quite simple, built around principles that human science already understood. The aliens had simply had more time to perfect their tools, but the tools themselves were not magic. Paul gathered the group around Linda's workbench as she explained her discovery. The alien weapons worked by creating focused electromagnetic fields that could tear apart molecular bonds. Their shields used the same technology in reverse, creating barriers that absorbed and deflected energy. But the most important discovery was that all Zephyrian technology shared the same basic frequency pattern, like a universal key that unlocked every alien device. Meanwhile, across the ruined city, Amy Turner led her fighters through the subway tunnels beneath what had been Manhattan. The sergeant had survived the initial attack by being underground when the beams fell, and she had been fighting ever since. Her group of 43 people had learned to move like ghosts through the tunnel systems, striking at alien patrols and supply convoys before disappearing back into the darkness. Amy's people were not the only resistance fighters. All across the occupied zones, humans had begun to organize. They used the old subway systems, sewer tunnels, and forgotten basements to move without being seen. They communicated through hand signals and coded radio messages that sounded like static to alien ears. They stole weapons and supplies from the occupiers and learned to build bombs from household chemicals. The Zephyrians had expected scattered resistance, but they had not expected coordination. Human fighters in New York shared information with groups in Chicago, Los Angeles, and London. They learned from each other's successes and failures, adapting their tactics as they learned more about their enemies. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something the Zephyrians had never encountered before: the ability to work together even when separated by thousands of miles. Ryan Brooks had been a colonel in the Air Force before the invasion, and now he commanded the largest resistance cell in what remained of Colorado. His group lived in the old NORAD complex, deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, where the thick rock walls protected them from alien sensors. Ryan's people had been studying Zephyrian patrol patterns for months, and they had noticed something interesting. Alien technology seemed to malfunction during thunderstorms, not completely, but enough to matter. Their communications would fade, their shields would flicker, and their weapons would sometimes misfire. Ryan had been a pilot long enough to recognize the signs of electromagnetic interference, and he began to wonder if Earth's natural magnetic field might be the key to fighting back. Ryan shared his observations with Paul Richards through the Resistance radio network, and together they began to form a theory. Earth's magnetic field was different from the fields around the 17 worlds the Zephyrians had conquered before. It was stronger and more chaotic, filled with natural electromagnetic storms that the alien technology was not designed to handle. The first coordinated resistance strike happened on a night when Aurora danced across the northern sky. Amy Turner's fighters hit a Zephyrian supply depot in Manhattan at the exact moment when Ryan Brooks' people attacked a communication tower in Colorado. Both groups reported the same thing: the alien defenses were weaker than usual, flickering, and unstable. Word of the successful attacks spread through the resistance network like wildfire. Groups across the globe began timing their operations to coincide with natural electromagnetic events. Solar flares, thunderstorms, and magnetic anomalies became weapons in the human arsenal. The Zephyrians began to lose supplies, equipment, and personnel at an alarming rate. The Zephyrian commander in charge of Earth's occupation was a veteran warrior named Kethfer who had conquered 4 worlds before Earth. He had been confident that human resistance would fade within months, as it had on other worlds. But instead of fading, the resistance was growing stronger and more sophisticated. His forces were taking casualties daily, and his supply lines were under constant attack. Kethfer called for reinforcements from the home fleet, but help was months away. He increased patrols and built more crystal towers, trying to establish firmer control over the occupied territories, but every new tower required guards, and every patrol created new targets for human fighters. The Zephyrians found themselves spread thinner and thinner across a world that refused to stay conquered. In his laboratory beneath Chicago, Paul Richards made another discovery that would change everything. While studying a damaged alien communication device, he found that it was trying to connect to a network that spanned the entire planet. Every Zephyrian device, from weapons to vehicles to the crystal towers themselves, was part of a single vast system that shared information and energy. Paul realized that the network was both the aliens' greatest strength and their greatest weakness. If someone could find a way to access the network, they could potentially turn the entire Zephyrian infrastructure against itself. The aliens had built their conquest on the assumption that primitive humans could never understand their technology well enough to use it against them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Helen Ward had been studying whales for 15 years, but she had never seen anything like what was happening in the Pacific Ocean. The marine biologist floated 200 feet below the surface in her research submarine, watching as a pod of blue whales circled a Zephyrian mining platform. The whales were singing, their voices creating patterns that Helen's instruments had never recorded before. The alien platform was extracting something from the ocean floor, probably rare metals for their crystal towers. But the whales seemed to be interfering with the operation. Every time they sang their strange new song, lights flickered on the platform and machinery stopped working. The Zephyrians had built their mining station to be earthquake-proof and hurricane-resisting, but they had not planned for angry whales. Helen watched in amazement as the largest whale, a female nearly 90 feet long, swam directly under the platform and released a sound so deep and powerful that Helen felt it in her bones. The mining equipment shut down completely, and emergency lights began flashing on the alien structure. The whale song was somehow disrupting Zephyrian technology, just like the electromagnetic storms that the resistance fighters had learned to use. 3,000 miles away, Steve Miller was having his own encounter with Earth's oceanic response to the invasion. The submarine captain commanded the USS Leviathan, one of the few human vessels that had survived the initial attack by being underwater when the sky burned. For months, Steve and his crew had been conducting reconnaissance missions, mapping Zephyrian positions and looking for weaknesses. But today, Steve was watching something that made no scientific sense. A group of orcas was attacking a Zephyrian underwater base, ramming the structure with coordinated precision. The whales seemed to know exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage, targeting power conduits and support structures as if they had studied alien engineering. When Zephyrian defense systems activated, the orcas scattered with tactical intelligence that reminded Steve of his own military training. The ocean itself seemed to be fighting back against the invaders. Shark populations had increased dramatically near alien installations, making it dangerous for Zephyrian divers to work underwater. Dolphins had begun following alien submarines, using their echolocation to confuse sonar systems. Even jellyfish seemed to swarm around underwater alien equipment, their stings somehow interfering with sensitive electronics. Meanwhile, on land, Nina Foster was documenting changes that seemed even more impossible. The geologist had been tracking seismic activity since the invasion began, and the patterns she was seeing defied everything she knew about how the Earth worked. Earthquakes were occurring with suspicious timing, always seeming to hit Zephyrian installations during critical operations. Volcanic activity had increased along the Pacific Ring of Fire, but only in areas where aliens had built major facilities. Nina's instruments showed that the earthquakes were not random. They followed patterns that suggested some kind of coordination, as if the Earth itself was responding to the alien presence. Tectonic plates were shifting in ways that created maximum disruption to Zephyrian mining operations while leaving human settlements relatively untouched. It was as if the planet had developed an immune system and was trying to reject the alien infection. The most dramatic example came when a massive Zephyrian fortress built over the ruins of San Francisco began to sink into the ground. The aliens had chosen the location because it was close to important mineral deposits, but they had not realized they were building on an active fault line. A precisely timed earthquake opened a chasm directly under their main tower, swallowing millions of tons of alien equipment and sending shockwaves through the Zephyrian command structure. Helen Ward was still studying the whale songs when she made a connection that changed everything. The frequencies the whales were using matched the electromagnetic patterns that disrupted alien technology. But more than that, the whales seemed to be learning and adapting their songs based on the results they achieved. When one frequency stopped working against alien shields, the whales would try another, systematically testing different approaches until they found one that succeeded. Helen contacted the Resistance Network and shared her discovery. Within days, human fighters were using recordings of whale songs to enhance their electromagnetic weapons. The combination of natural whale frequencies and human engineering created disruption patterns that the Zephyrians could not counteract. For the first time since the invasion began, human weapons were consistently penetrating alien defenses. The Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. Commander Kethva ordered the systematic destruction of all large marine mammals, declaring them a threat to the occupation. Alien hunters began targeting whales, dolphins, and other sea creatures with the same ruthless efficiency they had once used against human cities. But the ocean fought back in ways the aliens had never imagined. Massive storms began forming. Whenever Zephyrian ships approached whale populations, hurricane-force winds would rise from calm seas within minutes, driving alien vessels away from their targets. Lightning struck alien aircraft with impossible accuracy, always seeming to find the most vulnerable systems. The Zephyrians began to lose more ships to weather than to human resistance fighters. Steve Miller witnessed the ocean's fury firsthand when he observed an alien hunting fleet being destroyed by what could only be described as a supernatural storm. Waterspouts formed around the alien ships like liquid tornadoes, while waves 50 feet high crashed over vessels designed to withstand any natural disaster. When the storm passed, nothing remained of the hunting fleet except scattered debris, floating on impossibly calm waters. Nina Foster documented similar events on land as volcanic eruptions targeted alien facilities with surgical precision. Mount Vesuvius, dormant for decades, erupted specifically to destroy a Zephyrian command center built on its slopes. Geysers in Yellowstone began firing superheated water at exact moments when alien patrols passed overhead. Even the weather seemed to be coordinating with the geological responses, creating perfect conditions for maximum damage to alien installations. The Zephyrians began to realize they were fighting more than human resistance. They were fighting an entire planet that had somehow become aware of their presence and was actively working to destroy them. Their reports back to the home fleet spoke of impossible phenomena, coordinated attacks by non-sentient species, and environmental disasters that seemed intelligently directed. But the most unsettling discovery was yet to come. Helen Ward detected something in the whale songs that made her question everything she thought she knew about intelligence and communication. The whales were not just disrupting alien technology randomly. They were sharing information across vast distances, coordinating their efforts with other species, and adapting their tactics in real time. The ocean had become a single vast intelligence dedicated to driving the invaders away, and humanity had found an ally more powerful than any weapon they could build. Lisa Chen returned to Earth's solar system with more than just human survivors. The Admiral had spent months traveling between the outer colonies, and what she found there had given her hope for the first time since the invasion began. Had enemies, other species they had conquered and enslaved over the decades, and many of them were eager to fight back. When they learned that someone was finally standing up to their oppressors, the first aliens to join Lisa's growing fleet were the Kithra, a race of insectoid engineers whose homeworld had been stripped of resources 50 years earlier. They brought with them knowledge of Zephyrian weaknesses and technology that could match alien shields and weapons. Behind them came the Novari aquatic beings whose water worlds had been polluted by Zephyrian mining operations. They understood the ocean's response to the invasion better than any human scientists could, but the most valuable allies were the Earthlings themselves. Tony Baker had been an aerospace engineer before the invasion, and now he led a team of mechanics and technicians who had learned to rebuild and improve captured Zephyrian equipment. Working with Cathora engineers, Tony's people had created the first human weapons that could consistently penetrate alien defenses. They had also developed new shields that used Earth's magnetic field to deflect Zephyrian energy weapons. The resistance movement that had begun in tunnels and basements was now becoming a proper army. Jake Morrison found himself promoted from survivor to general, commanding coordinated operations across multiple continents. The scared man who had watched his city burn was now a leader who could coordinate strikes involving thousands of fighters, alien allies, and Earth's own environmental defenses. The first major victory came when Danny West led a combined force of human fighters and Kithra engineers in an assault on the Zephyrian stronghold built over Los Angeles. The attack began with whale songs transmitted through modified speakers, disrupting alien communications and shields. Then came coordinated earthquake tremors, triggered by Novari Deep Earth technology. weakening the crystal towers that supported the enemy base. Danny's ground forces moved in as Zephyrian defenses crumbled, using weapons that fired concentrated bursts of Earth's magnetic field energy. The aliens had never faced anything like it. Their own weapons, designed to work with their technology, were useless against shields that drew power from the planet itself. Within 6 hours, the Los Angeles stronghold was in human hands, and its alien defenders were either dead or fleeing. Phillips coordinated the air assault from hidden bases in the Rocky Mountains. The pilot had learned to use Earth's magnetic storms as cover, leading squadrons of rebuilt aircraft through electromagnetic disturbances that made them invisible. 2 alien sensors, her fighters struck at Zephyrian air patrols with lightning speed, appearing out of magnetic anomalies to destroy enemy aircraft before vanishing back into the storm. The success at Los Angeles triggered a global uprising that the Zephyrians had not expected. Resistance cells that had been fighting separate battles for months suddenly found themselves part of a coordinated campaign to retake their world. Human fighters emerged from hiding with weapons that worked, alien allies who understood the enemy, and environmental support that made every battle feel like fighting alongside the planet itself. Marcus King led the European liberation, using tactics developed by studying Zephyrian failures on other worlds. The general had learned from Kythera veterans that the aliens always made the same mistake. They built their control centers in the most defensively logical locations, usually on high ground with clear sightlines, but this predictability made them vulnerable to coordinated attacks that combined human unpredictability with alien technological knowledge. The battle for London lasted 3 days and ended with the complete destruction of the Zephyrian occupation force. King's fighters used modified whale song frequencies to disrupt alien communications, while Navari weather control technology created fog that blinded enemy sensors. Underground, Amy Turner's tunnel fighters had linked up with similar groups across Europe, creating a network of hidden passages that allowed human forces to appear anywhere, at any time. But the most devastating weapon in the human arsenal was not technology at all. It was the planet Earth itself, which had somehow learned to coordinate its responses to the alien threat. Volcanoes erupted at precisely the right moments to cut off Zephyrian retreat routes. Hurricanes formed to destroy alien supply ships. Lightning struck enemy aircraft with accuracy that defied all natural law. Helen Ward had become the coordinator between human forces and Earth's environmental responses. The marine biologist could now communicate with whales, dolphins, and other sea creatures through a combination of acoustic patterns and electromagnetic signals. Through them, she could request specific weather patterns, seismic events, and oceanic disturbances to support military operations. The coordination between human intelligence and planetary force reached its peak during the assault on the Zephyr Command Center in what had been Washington, D.C., as Marcus King's forces approached from the north and Danny West's army moved in from the south. The Earth itself joined the attack. Precisely timed earthquakes weakened the crystal towers that powered alien defenses. Lightning storms disrupted their communications. Even the local wildlife seemed to be working with human forces, as flocks of birds interfered with enemy aircraft. While underground creatures damaged power cables, Commander Kethva watched his carefully planned occupation collapse around him, and finally understood what his forces were really fighting. This was not a conquest that had faced unexpected resistance. This was an invasion that had awakened something vast and angry, something that included not just the human population but the entire living planet. They had tried to claim. The Zephyrian commander called for immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel and prepared to make his final stand from the most heavily fortified position on Earth. But even as he gave the orders, Kethva knew that his forces were doomed. They had not conquered a world, had attacked a living entity that was fighting back with the fury of billions of years of evolution. The crystal towers that the Zephyrians had built as symbols of their victory were becoming the instruments of their defeat. Paul Richards had finally cracked the alien network codes, and Tony Baker had built transmitters that could broadcast disruptive signals through the entire Zephyrian communication system. Every tower, every weapon, every piece of alien technology on Earth was about to be turned against its creators in a final coordinated strike that would end the occupation forever. The final battle began at dawn on a Tuesday when every piece of Zephyrian technology on Earth started screaming. Paul Richards had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, working with Tony Baker and Kythera engineers to build a device that could turn the aliens' own network against them. The electromagnetic pulse generator was hidden deep beneath Chicago, drawing power from Earth's magnetic field. and broadcasting a signal that would rewrite every Zephyrian system on the planet. Morrison stood on a hill overlooking what had been Washington, D.C., watching as the alien crystal towers began to glow with unstable energy. The towers that the Zephyrians had built as monuments to their conquest were now conducting a massive electrical storm that would destroy everything connected to them. The aliens had unknowingly built the infrastructure for their own destruction, and now Earth was using it against them. The Zephyrian command center erupted in chaos as every screen, control panel, and communication device began displaying the same message in perfect Zephyrian script: "Leave our world or die with it." Paul's team had learned enough of the alien language to craft the ultimatum, and they had made sure it appeared on every device simultaneously. Commander Kethver stared at the message in disbelief, realizing that the primitive humans had not only learned to use Zephyrian technology but had turned it into a weapon of unprecedented power. Ben Harper led the ground assault on the main Zephyrian fortress, but his forces found that most of their work had already been done. Alien weapons were exploding in their users' hands as the corrupted network signals overloaded their power systems. Shields flickered and failed as the electromagnetic storm grew stronger. The crystal towers that had once seemed beautiful and invulnerable were now crackling with deadly energy that killed any Zephyrian who came too close. The assault was not happening only around the command center. Across the globe, human forces were moving against every remaining Zephyrian position, supported by alien allies and coordinated environmental responses that defied explanation. In Australia, Danny West watched as a dust storm rose from the desert at exactly the right moment to blind enemy sensors. In Europe, Marcus King's forces advanced under cover of fog that formed from clear skies and dissipated the moment human troops were in position. Sarah Phillips flew through electromagnetic storms that seemed designed to hide her aircraft while disrupting every alien system in the sky. The pilot had learned to navigate by following the magnetic field lines that Earth itself was manipulating to guide human forces and confuse their enemies. Her squadron struck at fleeing Zephyrian ships with weapons that fired concentrated bursts of planetary energy, turning the aliens' own technology into conducting rods for massive electrical discharges. But the most devastating attack came from the oceans themselves. Helen Ward had coordinated with whale pods across the planet to create a sonic resonance pattern that would shatter the underwater supports of every Zephyrian sea-based installation. The whales sang in harmony across thousands of miles, their voices combining into a weapon that no alien engineer had ever imagined. Underwater cities that had taken months to build collapsed in minutes as the ocean reclaimed them. The Zephyrians tried to evacuate their remaining forces, but Earth's magnetic field was now working against them. Their ships' navigation systems failed as soon as they left the ground, sending them spinning out of control into storms that appeared from nowhere. Those vessels that managed to climb high enough to escape the atmosphere found themselves facing Lisa Chen's combined fleet of human survivors and aliens, allies who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Admiral Chen had positioned her forces throughout the solar system, creating a blockade that no Zephyrian ship could penetrate. The aliens who had come to Earth as conquerors now found themselves trapped on a world that was actively trying to kill them, facing enemies who understood their technology better than they did themselves. The Cathora and Navari allies brought weapons specifically designed to penetate Zephyrian defenses, while human crews operated with the desperate courage of people fighting for their home. Commander Kethver made one final attempt to establish control by ordering his remaining forces to destroy the electromagnetic pulse generator beneath Chicago. But Amy Turner's tunnel fighters had anticipated this move, and they had spent weeks preparing defenses that used the city's own infrastructure as a weapon. The moment Zephyrian forces entered the underground systems, they found themselves trapped in a maze of collapsed tunnels, flooded passages, and electrical storms that seemed to follow them wherever they went. The battle for Chicago became a rout as Earth itself joined the fight against the invaders. Gas lines exploded at precisely the right moments to cut off alien retreat routes. Water mains burst to flood enemy positions. Even the rats and pigeons seemed to be working against the Zephyrians, interfering with their equipment and providing intelligence to human defenders who somehow understood what the animals were trying to communicate. Paul Richards watched from his control room as his electromagnetic weapon reached full power and began broadcasting the final signal. Every device on Earth would now receive the same instruction: self-destruct in 60 seconds. The aliens had built their occupation force using networked technology that shared information and power across vast distances. Now that same network would carry the signal that would destroy every piece of Zephyrian equipment simultaneously. Crystal towers began to collapse as their power systems overloaded and exploded. Alien weapons melted in their users' hands as energy conduits failed catastrophically. Even the Zephyrian armor and personal equipment began to spark and smoke as the corruption spread through every connected system. The aliens found themselves naked and defenseless on a world that wanted them dead. Facing enemies who had turned their own superior technology against them, Kethver stood in the ruins of his command center, and finally understood the magnitude of his force's defeat. The Zephyrians had not lost because they were outnumbered or outgunned. They had lost because they had fundamentally misunderstood what they were fighting. Earth was not just a planet inhabited by humans. It was a living entity that had chosen sides in this war, and it had chosen to fight alongside the species that had evolved as part of its natural systems. The commander activated his personal emergency beacon, hoping to signal the home fleet for rescue. But as the signal went out, he realized that Earth's electromagnetic field was modifying his transmission, adding a message that he had not authorized. The planet itself was telling the home fleet exactly what would happen to any force that tried to invade this world again. 3 months after the electromagnetic storm destroyed the last Zephyrian stronghold, Jake Morrison stood where the Washington Monument had once risen toward the sky. The alien crystal towers lay in ruins around him, their blue light forever extinguished, their elegant spires reduced to glittering debris that work crews were slowly clearing away. Where the towers had fallen, construction teams were building something new, something that combined human architecture with the best aspects of alien engineering that Earth's defenders had learned to understand and improve. The surviving Zephyr faced a choice that their species had never offered to others. Lisa Chen, now serving as the first president of the United Earth government, had gathered the alien survivors in the ruins of New York and given them the same option that humans had never received: leave peacefully or stay and help repair the damage they had caused. Many chose to leave, taking the few ships that Earth's magnetic field allowed to function and fleeing toward their home worlds with warnings about the planet that fought back. But others chose to stay. Commander Kethver was among them, stripped of rank and authority, but still possessing engineering knowledge that could help rebuild the cities his forces had destroyed. The former Zephyrian commander worked alongside human construction crews, his metal skin scarred by the electromagnetic storms he had survived, his glowing eyes dimmed by defeat and something that might have been shame. Tony Baker led the reconstruction efforts, combining human creativity with Zephyrian engineering precision and the environmental wisdom that Earth itself had taught during the war. The new cities that rose from the ashes were unlike anything either species had built before. They drew power from the planet's magnetic field, used whale songs to communicate across vast distances, and incorporated living systems that allowed buildings to adapt and grow like organic structures. Helen Ward had become something more than a marine biologist. She served as Earth's first planetary communication coordinator, maintaining the connection between human civilization and the natural systems that had fought alongside them. The whales still sang their strange new songs, but now their music carried messages of peace and cooperation instead of war. The ocean had returned to its ancient rhythms, but it remained watchful, ready to defend the world it had helped to save. Amy Turner emerged from the tunnels to find herself appointed as Director of Underground Infrastructure, responsible for the vast network of passages and hidden spaces that had saved humanity during its darkest hours. The subway systems and sewer tunnels that had sheltered the resistance were being expanded and improved, creating a secondary city beneath every surface settlement that would ensure Earth could never again be caught unprepared by invasion. The memorial that Jake Morrison had helped design stood at the center of the new capital, built from metal, salvaged from destroyed Zephyrian weapons, and melted into a sculpture that reached toward the sky like a crystal tower but moved like a living tree. The inscription was visible from miles away, written in human languages and Zephyrian script and the acoustic patterns that whales used to communicate. Across oceans, they burned our cities and built their own graves, but from those ashes we built tomorrow. Paul Richards had become Earth's foremost expert on planetary defense systems, working with scientists from a dozen allied species to develop technologies that would protect not just Earth but any world threatened by conquest. His electromagnetic pulse generators were being installed on Kithra colonies and Novari waterworlds, adapted to work with each planet's unique magnetic signature. The network of defenses growing throughout the galaxy was based on a simple principle: worlds that supported life would defend themselves, if given the tools and knowledge to do so. The First Interstellar Congress convened in Earth's new capital, 1 year after the liberation, bringing together representatives from every species that had suffered under Zephyrian conquest. Lisa Chen opened the proceedings by reading a statement that had been composed jointly by human linguists and whale song interpreters, translated into dozens of languages and acoustic patterns that spoke of freedom, cooperation, and the right of every world to determine its own destiny. The Zephyrian home fleet received Earth's message and chose to stay away. Their reports from the surviving colonists spoke of impossible phenomena, of a world that fought alongside its inhabitants, of technology that could be turned against itself by enemies who understood it better than its creators. The proud warrior race that had conquered 17 worlds decided that Earth was not worth the cost of another invasion, but Earth's influence was spreading beyond its own solar system in ways that the Zephyrians had not anticipated. The technologies developed during the Resistance were being shared freely with any species that wanted them. Worlds that had been considered too weak to defend themselves were suddenly developing electromagnetic defenses, training their local wildlife to interfere with invader technology, and building underground networks that could support resistance movements for decades if necessary. Danny West led the first Earth Defense Force expedition to liberate a Cthulhu colony world, using tactics developed during the fight for Los Angeles. The mission succeeded in 3 days with minimal casualties, as Zephyrian occupation forces found themselves facing not just rebel fighters, but coordinated environmental resistance from a planet that had learned Earth's lessons about fighting back. The Liberation Fleet included human crews, Kithra engineers, Navari water specialists, and even a few reformed Zephyrians who had chosen to help free worlds they had once helped to conquer. Marcus King established the Galactic Defense Academy in Earth's orbital stations, training freedom fighters from across the galaxy in the tactics that had saved humanity. The Academy's first lesson was always the same: no world was defenseless if its inhabitants were willing to work with the natural systems that supported life. Every planet had unique advantages that could be turned against invaders, from magnetic fields to weather patterns to local wildlife that could be taught to recognize and resist alien threats. Sarah Phillips commanded the first mixed-species fighter squadron, leading pilots from 6 different worlds in patrol missions that kept the spaceways safe for legitimate travelers while hunting down the remnants of Zephyrian raider fleets. Her ships used Earth-developed magnetic field navigation systems that made them nearly impossible to track or target, appearing out of electromagnetic storms to destroy pirates and slavers, before vanishing back into the cosmic background radiation. The Zephyrian Empire, which had once seemed unstoppable, was crumbling as world after world successfully rebelled using Earth-developed tactics and technologies. The proud warriors found themselves facing enemies they could not understand, planets that fought back with the fury of living entities, and resistance movements that turned their own superior technology against them. Within 5 years of Earth liberation, the Zephyrian Empire had lost more than half its territory to species they had once considered too primitive to resist. Jake Morrison returned to the hill where he had watched the final battle, but now he looked out over a city that sparkled with new life. Human children played in parks where alien crystal towers had once stood, while Zephyrian youngsters who had been born on Earth after the war learned human games and sang whale songs with voices that blended alien harmonics with terrestrial melodies. The world that had almost been destroyed had become the center of something new. A civilization that proved cooperation was stronger than conquest, and that even the most advanced technology was worthless without the wisdom to use it well. Earth had become more than a planet. It had become a symbol and a promise that no world had to face invasion alone, that life itself would always fight back against those who tried to destroy it, and that from the ashes of even the greatest defeat, something beautiful and strong could always rise again.